My name is David Landini. Today, the 8th of June 2023, I attended the Productivity Commission presentation at the Deniliquin RSL. The Productivity Commission is a bureaucracy appointed by the federal government to independently oversee or overview the application and the effectiveness of the Basin plan. It was a very well attended meeting. There were approximately 100 people there. The attendees were invited to offer their or provide their opinion on the Basin plan, on things that they thought needed to be addressed. Most of the commentary or most of the comments made by the people that spoke were on two different aspects, I would say. First one, or one of them, was the mistakes and the errors and the misconceptions held by the MDBA, the harm, the damage that's been done to the environment, such as fish kills. That was that was mentioned a number of times. And also the false claims made by the MDBA about the requirements of the environment. Historically, some of the claims are not realistic. They never actually existed in the past, but the MDBA is trying to accomplish those now. And just for example, the most obvious ones, and these were mentioned today, is the situation in South Australia. South Australia got a lot of mentions, actually. There was a lot of criticism of what's seen to be a squandering of water in South Australia, particularly when South Australia takes up about 6.5% of the area of the catchment of the Murray-Darling Basin, yet receives 55% of all the water collected out of the basin. But some of the falsehoods are, for example, the Murray Mouth to be kept open 9 years out of 10, Lake Alexandrina and Albert to be maintained as freshwater lakes, when it's most obvious and proven that these are actually the saltwater estuaries of the Murray River. And also the Coorong trying to force water up the wrong way where the Coorong naturally doesn't flow. But all of these requirements require great amounts of water that are taken out of productive use in the irrigation areas of the Riverina and Victoria and South Australia. So that was the criticism. There was a lot of criticism on that application of the Basin plan, on those falsehoods held by the MDBA. The another aspect that was really covered was the harm, the damage that it does to the local people in the affected area. Most obviously, it affects the economy of the local area. It takes away a lot of jobs, and that loss of jobs leads to not only the removal of those people from the area, because fundamentally, basically, the younger population, if he, particularly the male, the man, if he doesn't have a job, he has to leave. He has to go where he can get a job. The retired population, they can stay because they have their retirement income, but particularly young men, they have to have a job, and if they haven't got one, they have to go. And because the water, the taking it out of the water out of the area, takes away a lot of that wealth production, it takes away the jobs and the employment that is employed in that wealth creation. And it was made, one comment there today was made that out of a typical farm, 100% of its income, for example, 20% stays on farm and the other 80% is spent on production costs, which is employment in the local area. So when the water goes out, it creates a lot of, takes away a lot of jobs, takes away a lot of people. And that affects not only those people, but the people that are left behind are left with a decimated social fabric, I suppose you could call it. And most obviously the social groups such as football clubs, cricket clubs, tennis clubs are left with a much smaller population. They decline greatly, and in many cases they fold or close entirely. So they were the two areas of criticism that were put to the Productivity Commission. And just a word on the Productivity Commission. The purpose of the Productivity Commission, and I should have mentioned this straight up, is to review the application and the effectiveness of the Basin Plan. It's not, as the name sort of implies, to review the productivity of the local area. It's not there to measure the productivity of the rice or the dairy or the cotton or whatever. No, it's there to review the application and the effectiveness of the Basin Plan as an independent body, even though it's a government bureaucracy, of the Murray-Darling Basin Authority. I took the opportunity to address the Productivity Commission and the large number of people there, and just to discuss the politics that's involved in the Basin Plan. And it was, as I said before, it was mentioned often that there's a lot of misconceptions with the Basin Plan by the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, I should say. There's a lot of inconsistencies in the application of the Basin Plan. There's a lot of errors in the Basin Plan. And we can safely conclude that the Basin Plan is actually not an environmental plan. It's not actually there to protect the environment of the river or the countryside or the animal life and that sort of thing. I just made the point that because of the inconsistencies in the Basin Plan, it's obviously not an environmental plan. But looked at from a political aspect, it's entirely logical. And I made the point that the Basin Plan is actually a political plan, and the objective of the Basin Plan is to gain votes in the metropolitan areas for the politicians that have formulated that plan. And just to support that and to bring to people's attention some of the politics in New South Wales, the first point I made was that the country areas are grossly underrepresented in the New South Wales Parliament. Out of the 93 electorates in the Legislative Assembly, 71 are in the Newcastle, Sydney and Wollongong areas, and only 22 in the remainder of the state. And that illustrates the gross underrepresentation that country people have in the New South Wales Parliament. Now, within that urban population, I also explained that in the 2023 election that 451,344 people voted number one for the Greens in the Legislative Assembly. The Greens, of course, are opposed entirely to all irrigation. There is no water extractions with the Greens, and that is their official policy. There's also another party called the Sustainable Australia Party. I wasn't actually familiar with this party. I looked them up on their website, and to be quite frank, as far as water goes, they're worse than the Greens. They're actually critical of the Greens because they say that they're not hard enough. So between them, the Greens and the Sustainable Australia Party, who are opposed entirely to all water extractions, all irrigation, there's a total of 556,092 people voted number one for those two parties. Now, just to sort of put it into a physical perspective, in the 9 electorates west of the Great Dividing Range, plus the electorates of Monero and the electorate of Bega in the southeast, there's only a total of 545,993 voters total. So there's more people in New South Wales who vote for the Greens and the Sustainable Australia Party, who are opposed to all water extractions, than the total number of voters in the 9 electorates west of the Great Dividing Range, plus Monero, plus Bega. Now those 11 electorates take up 85% of the area of the state, and all the irrigation, of course. So there's more people that vote for the Greens and the Sustainable Australia Party who are opposed to the irrigation industry than the total number of voters in 85% of the area of the state. So that just illustrates the domination of the state, number one by the urban population, but also the fact that there's a lot of people in that population, because most of those Green and Sustainable Australia Party voters are in that urban area. Within that domination of the state by that urban population, there's a very large fraction that are opposed to our industries that our livelihoods depend on. So that was the second point I made. And the third point, and this was actually made by another speaker as well, is that the country electorates get bigger in area all the time. Because electorates are based on equal population and they're limited to 93 and most of the population growth is in the urban area, the country electorates get bigger to encompass more people in those electorates, but as they get bigger and bigger and bigger, they move from the country into the city. And in fact, on average, as I pointed out, every 5 to 8 years, the country areas in New South Wales lose one electorate, one member of parliament. So we already have a gross underrepresentation in the New South Wales Parliament, and that underrepresentation is increasing. So I just wanted to explain, I just made the point that, look, we actually have a political problem in New South Wales with water. It's presented or disguised as an environmental problem, but in reality, it's a political problem. Now, for us, if we want to maintain our prosperity, keep our industries, keep our jobs, keep the people in these areas, we have to find a solution. Obviously, from the environmental point of view, the errors and the mistakes that get pointed out by our local representatives really have not affected the Basin Plan, regrettably. And that is because, of course, it's not an environmental problem. It's a political problem. And for us to prosper, we have to find a solution that takes into account the politics of New South Wales. So I took the opportunity to make those points. Certainly the audience certainly paid attention, and I really hope that what was explained to them will just illustrate the problems that we have, including that political problem, or actually that political problem, and hopefully that our actions in the future take that into account. And of course, the only solution is a riverine estate.